All right, today we're getting down to the very bottom of what holds a building up. We're talking about the part that does all the heavy lifting but gets absolutely none of the glory, the concrete foundation.
So, let me kick things off with a question for you. What is the single most important part of any building that you will probably never ever see? Any ideas? If you were thinking the foundation, you nailed it. It is the unseen hero, the silent workhorse that literally everything else depends on. So, let's dig in and see why the base of a building is, well, everything. Now, the official definition seems pretty simple, right? It's the part below ground that holds the whole building up. But think about it. It's the critical connection between the man-made structure and the earth itself. If you get this part wrong, nothing else you build on top of it stands a chance. But here's the thing. Not all ground is the same, and neither are all buildings. That's why you can't have a one-size-fits-all foundation. You gotta have different tools for different jobs. Let's break down the 4 main types you really need to know about. First up is the one you're going to see most often, the strip foundation. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a continuous strip, almost like a ribbon of concrete, that runs directly underneath the main walls of a building. So here's how it works. For most houses, the walls are carrying the bulk of the weight. A strip foundation takes all that pressure and spreads it out evenly along its entire length, transferring it safely into the ground. It's simple, it's super effective, and it's perfect when you're building on solid ground. Okay, next we've got the raft foundation. Now, I want you to imagine taking that concrete strip we just talked about and stretching it out until it covers the entire footprint of the building. What you're left with is one giant, flat slab of concrete. So why on earth would you need a giant concrete raft? Well, think of it like wearing snowshoes. If you step in deep, soft snow with just your boots, you sink, right? But with snowshoes, your weight gets spread out over a huge area and you stay on top. A raft foundation does the exact same thing for a building on soft or swampy soil. It basically lets the whole structure float. All right, our third type is the pad foundation. This one's different. It isn't a long strip and it's not a big slab. Instead, it's a single, isolated block of concrete, usually a square or a rectangle. And its job is super specific. A pad foundation is made to handle a massive, concentrated load from a single point, like a big structural pillar or column. It's like giving each pillar its own personal concrete foot to stand on, making sure it won't punch right through the ground. And finally, we have shortboard piles. With this method, we're totally changing our strategy. We stop thinking about spreading weight across the surface, and we start thinking about going deep. We're literally drilling holes way down into the ground and filling them up with concrete. You bring in piles when the soil near the surface is just too weak or unstable for anything else. These concrete piles act like stilts for the building. They bypass all the soft, mushy layers on top and transfer the building's weight all the way down to a solid layer of rock or strong soil deep underground. So let's do a quick recap, shall we? You've got strip foundations for walls, raft foundations for soft ground, pad foundations for single columns, and piles when you've got weak soil. 4 very different problems and 4 very specific solutions. Okay, so now we know the what and the why. Let's get our hands a little dirty and look at the how. We're going to do a step-by-step on building the most common type, the strip foundation. First things first, what do you actually need? Well, your materials are the classic ingredients for concrete: cement, sand, gravel, which we call aggregate, and of course water. And your tools are pretty straightforward stuff: things for digging, things for moving material, and most importantly, tools for measuring and leveling. The whole process really breaks down into 3 big stages. First is all the prep work. You mark out your area, you dig the trench, and you check and double check that everything is perfectly level. The second stage is the pour itself. You mix your concrete and get it into the trench. And finally, the last stage, and this is the one people always underestimate, you have to let it cure. And it's not just drying, it's a chemical reaction that gives concrete its legendary strength. And of course, I have to say it, safety is absolutely non-negotiable. You have to be digging on firm ground. You need to be obsessive about checking your measurements. And you've got to wear the proper safety gear. There are no shortcuts here. So the concrete is poured, it's cured, and it's hard. But how do you know if you're looking at a good, solid foundation? Well, there are a few key signs to look for. These are the big 4. It has to be perfectly straight and level. Your spirit level is your best friend here. It must be the exact depth and width called for in the plans. It should be free of any major cracks. And finally, it needs to feel strong and solid. You should be able to tell it's a rock-solid base. Now, let's flip the coin and talk about what happens when things go wrong. Because with the foundation, messing up just isn't an option. Let's cover the critical mistakes you absolutely have to avoid. These are the 4 horsemen of foundation failure. Wrong measurements mean your walls won't sit right. A poor concrete mix means you'll have weak spots just waiting to fail. If it isn't level, the whole building will be unstable from the start. And skipping that crucial curing time, that means your concrete never even reaches the strength it was designed for.
And the stakes? Well, they couldn't possibly be higher. A weak foundation doesn't just lead to a few cracks in the wall. The absolute worst-case scenario is a total building collapse. This, right here, is why the foundation is the single most critical piece of the puzzle. Okay, I know that was a lot of information to take in. So here's a really simple way to remember those 4 main types we covered. Just think SRPP. That's strip, raft, pad, and piles. SRPP. It's a super easy way to keep them all straight in your head.
You know, in the end, this is a lesson that goes way beyond construction. Every great project, every big idea, every successful life, it all needs a solid base to be built on. So the real question is, what will you build on yours?